Feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges and seeking healing? Welcome to Your Love Talk, a safe haven where you'll discover effective strategies to overcome obstacles. Join Dr. Beverly Booth as she explores inspiring tales of resilience from individuals who have triumphed over adversity, emerging stronger and more fulfilled. Unleash your inner strength and embark on a journey of transformation. Now, here's your host, Dr. Beverly.
Welcome to Your Love Talk. I'm happy to introduce Doc Williams to this podcast episode today. Doc is a retired U.S. Air Force veteran who was unfairly terminated after 38 years of service. Doc talks about the stress it caused him emotionally and physically and the impact it had on his mental health. Doc found the strength to fight back and find purpose in this new phase of his life. Listen to Doc as he shares his story. Hi, Derek Williams, also known as Doc. Welcome to the Love Talk podcast.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beverly. I appreciate you having me on today. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I actually met you a couple of weeks ago at an event at Grace Covenant Church, the church that we attend, and I thought you'd be a really good person to be on the podcast. I heard your testimony, and you've been through some challenges. So I thought it would be good for the audience to hear about how you navigated through them. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So you are retired from the military and you are currently serving in various capacities. I would love for the audience to hear the work that you're doing now.
Okay. Yes, I retired after 38 years of service to the United States Air Force. I was fortunate enough to have two good careers. One was jet engine propulsion engineering, and the other was computer networks and cybersecurity. I retired in 2013, 2014 timeframe and moved here to Virginia in late 2016, early 2017. Soon after that, I started attending Grace Covenant Church, and I'm a volunteer with Grace Loves, the outreach arm of the church at the Chantilly and Sterling campus. I also run a quarterly blood drive for the church in Chantilly, and I've also joined the Advancing Through Adversity class at my church as a facilitator.
That's great. I know one of the things that I love about Grace is their community outreach, and especially during the pandemic when they started that program to be able to just reach various people in various capacities. So I'm glad that you're able to have the opportunity to serve.
Yes, it's my time and chance to give back. We hear the old adage that says, to whom much is given, much is required. So I don't mind paying back and paying forward because much was given to me.
That's wonderful. So, Doc, you actually had some adversities in the military that you had to really work to overcome. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Oh, sure. Some of the adversities, coming from a large family and a tight-knit family, being away from my family for so many miles, such a long distance, my first base being in the Philippines. And I've had to navigate prejudice, fight against prejudice, being treated as a person to meet a required quota at times while watching others who were just as qualified as me being denied opportunity, support, and promotion. For me, coming to grips with the fact that I had to work much harder and longer than my counterparts to succeed. Also being terminated and railroaded out of a position I worked so hard to be successful in, losing my job, insurance, being accused of something I did not do, while others took the credit for the successful work I did, losing my home, my dignity, having to rely on welfare, public assistance as I was approaching retirement in the next 2 years, and eventually having to go back home and live with my elderly aunt and uncle who helped raise me. Also losing my fiance in the process of all I was going through at the time, a time when you really need that person the most. So yeah, that since 2013, to 2015, 2016 rather, that was probably the toughest and the longest time for me in my life.
That's a lot of loss. So can you talk a little bit about what happened in the military?
Yes. I was one of the few people of color who had the privilege of working in this particular area. That was what we call high visibility. The supervisor at the time, or the manager at the time, they hired me for my skills, my expertise, knowledge, skills, and expertise. And once they got what they wanted out of me, the job done, and the entire campus network revamped, got budget from DC headquarters, Pentagon, while he was at school. He told me to handle this. He went to some supervisory school trying to make his next level. And when he came back, everything was done. And he was like, "How'd you do all this?" And I said, "Well, that's what you hired me for." And he was very upset that his name was not on all that had happened while he was away. He did not expect that much progress to have been made without him being attached to it. I was told by another commander that what my team and I did in 3 months, they couldn't get done in 3 years.
Wow.
And it was a testament to the things I had learned. The team that I had was superb, and they worked with me. If I had to go anywhere else, I'd want to drag them with me, take them with me. But people have to go where the Air Force tells them to go. But he was very much disappointed, not disappointed, he was enraged because the credit didn't come directly from him. And I asked him, I said, "Why would you ask me to do this, knowing my skill set and knowing what I had done at my previous unit, and not expect me to do it?" And consequently, I got this man promoted 2 times and he still wasn't satisfied. And what the other commander told me was that he perceived me as a threat. And I'm like, I don't want anything he has. I don't want his job. I don't want nothing. I just want my check and go home. But that wasn't enough. Whatever fears he had that I was not concerned with, he took that out on me, myself, and 2 other people on the team. And if it wasn't for my lawyer and having the insight, and I won't say insight, having a good union rep who was knowledgeable of prejudice and EEO type things, he advised me to move forward with legal representation based on the criteria with which they let me go. I did, and that was the most beneficial thing I was able to do, because when an investigation went forth 4 years later, they found evidence of those types of practices from that person and their colleagues going years back. And why that wasn't exposed before is because actual complaints stay at the location or the base and don't leave, because they're either resolved or they pass the time for them to be considered. Me putting a case forward was the first time that an actual federal case went against them in the investigation, is when they found all the other complaints, and they were able to shut them down and give me my retirement, because they went after that too.
Wow. So did they find that this person and others were also discriminating against other people of color?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, there's a case that's still, I can't speak on it, but there's another case that's still pending in reference to the same people for the same things soon after I had left.
Yeah, that is so sad that many people of color, I should say some, but actually many, often in the workforce, number one, they don't get equal pay. And number two, when they're trying to move up the ranks, sometimes they suffer adversity.
Yes.
And have to keep fighting.
That was me.
Yeah. And so you're saying, Doc, that because of that experience, you lost your home?
Yes. Being terminated, I lost my home, had to be on welfare, lost my insurances. While on welfare, had to live with my elderly and my elderly aunt and uncle, who, thank God, it was a two-way street. They were getting older and more feeble, and me staying with them was a help to them. But they knew me because they had raised me and they knew my characters. My uncle was one of the people who championed me into going into the Air Force. And coming back home was a blessing from God to be able to live with them. Now, my dignity was crushed, but my aunt, that lady, she was going down in years and health, but she was spiraling up in encouragement, in strength, in faith, and she was able to pass that on to me.
Wow, that's very special. Are they both alive today?
No, they passed. Uncle Vincent passed first, and Aunt Helen passed 2 years later. So just lost them. Prior to that, my father, who we lost in 2012, that was the other thing that was going on during this time. When I was dealing with this, my father had passed in 2012. And my father was my best friend. He was my first teacher and my best friend. I'm the eldest of 6. And between myself and my eldest sister, there's 10 years. So I got siblings that I'm 20 something years older than. And that was tough for them to see me fall when I was the person that they looked up to. And it affected me. It really affected me bad because when he passed, I come from a family of longevity well into the 90s. Mm-hmm. And when he passed at 83, I was no good for about 2 years.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. But God helps those who help themselves, even when you don't want to help yourself. Sometimes he forces you into a position to help yourself. And then he also sends people for you. Yeah. And at first I rejected them. I did not want to hear. I was mad at God. I was mad at my family. I was mad at the way things were going with my father's affairs after he passed. The honesty has almost wrecked my family. And that was not what he asked me to do. And I'm grateful for my family. And I'm grateful for those in my family who encouraged me and also those who shook me up.
So there's tough love.
Yeah. Tough love. And this happens to everybody. And all the things I knew already, but didn't want to hear, didn't want to face. Mm-hmm. My family who could deal with me, they dealt with me. My family who could not deal with me, they left me alone. I thank God for recovery and forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And another chance.
Yeah. So how did it impact your mental health during that time? Do you feel like you were going through mostly anger, or was it some depression, or a combination?
It was a combination of depression, mental, family anguish. I was in denial. I can honestly tell you I was in denial that anything was wrong because I'd always been what they call the point man, the guy who can handle it. I don't know if you remember years ago, there was a commercial, a cereal commercial. It said, give it to Mikey. And if he likes it, then everybody else will. And the brothers are watching him and then they turn around and go, hey, Mikey, he likes it.
Yes, I remember that commercial.
Yeah. And that was the go-to guy in the military. I was Mr. Make It Happen, or the famous quote throughout all branches of the military is make it happen, Captain. And I was that guy. And it got me promoted, awarded, and decorated, but at the sacrifice of family, being with family, a family of my own, and divorced from my first marriage, no children. But I did everything that I was asked to do and was supposed to do, and that I promised my dad I would do. I did that and had it all come crushing down on me after he passed. And to a point, I don't know if this is the right thing to say, but I'm kind of glad he transitioned at that time so he would not be able to see my demise, because that would have crushed him. So my niece from my eldest sister, Shannon, she was about to graduate from New York Institute of Technology with a master's degree in psychology. And when she couldn't stand it anymore, she got in my case. She shook up. But she did it with love. And that kind of stood me up reluctantly, but it stood me up and made me face the music. And from that, we had subsequent conversations. And she said, hey, one of our other siblings, who my father was married several times. So one of our other siblings, he went through it with his mother. And she told me, you might need to seek some help. And this is what Uncle Wendell had to do. So I need you to do that. And I did. I sought help. I started going back to church in New York, where I'm from. And the job I was able to get there through a program from public assistance, they had a help to work program called FedCap. In order to continue to receive benefits, which I needed at the time, you had to attend that. Well, I aced the tech test and they got me a job in Manhattan in Rockefeller Center working for a nonprofit agency. I was able to do the same thing there, build out their entire enterprise with a partner. We did a good job. It still exists today. But from there, when that contract closed, I had to move on because that job was done and there was nothing else further from there. But in the interim, it helped me to get back up and stand up financially, start paying off some bills. I was able to start paying my lawyer who had the case for me. And then things transitioned in New York where my aunt and uncle moved down to Atlanta to be with their two sons and their families. That house went up for sale. I was the caretaker of the home in New York until it sold. But when it sold, then I had to move on. I went down to my brother in North Carolina, the same one that my niece talked about. And from there, I worked 3 months straight. I joke and tell people that the Starbucks down there is probably still looking for me because I was using their bandwidth left, right, and center. And I was able to connect with this. They had a job fair in the area, NC State, the Kimmel Center. I was able to get to that job fair. It's close to the home. And there was a bunch of tech companies. I was in tech heaven, but nobody was hiring except this one organization. They said, hey, we'll keep you on the list. We'll look for something. And that company's called Resolve IT, Resolve It. Eventually, Resolve It hired me, but they only had a position. All their positions in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, were filled because they had just done a big push and they filled all those positions. The only thing they had was a position up here in Virginia, in Reston. And I took that position as a global architect, and things began to move up from there. And where I live today, I have to get up every morning and put my hands on something in here, wall, furniture, something. And thank God, because in New York, I've never lived this good. And I am truly, truly grateful for where I live and how I live. I'm grateful that I fought for what was right.
Yeah.
My retirement was eventually awarded to me 2 years back pay. So I was able to pay my bills and
excellent.
Stand back up on my feet. And I've had a couple of other contracts since then. I've done contract work. I did not go back into the government on purpose, but I've been able to make some good strides. I fully retired from the military and Department of Defense civilian service. So that takes care of my basics. And I serve now at church and with mentoring groups as much as I can, mentoring young people as much as I can, especially from church, because I can't see myself not doing it for what God has done for me.
Yeah, that is so awesome. And I'm glad an opportunity opened up for you to be in Virginia. I know Manhattan can be pretty expensive to live. Although it's expensive in Virginia as well, it's better than Manhattan, New York. So
Yeah. I worked in Manhattan, but I was born in the Bronx, raised in Queens, schooled in Long Island, and college in Manhattan before I went into the Air Force.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
New York is expensive anyway.
all over.
I
All over.
know.
I don't care what part you're in, it's
Yeah.
all over.
That's true. So you mentioned that you were married and that didn't work out. And you also mentioned that you were engaged and that fell through. Was that because of the homelessness that you experienced?
That she saw the impending demise of my career. We were supposed to be moving down here to the Tidewater area where she's from and move into, start over from there. She was successful in regaining her previous employment first. I had to stay in the New York, New Jersey area because of the case. And I was applying in that area, especially at Langley Air Force Base, but nothing was coming to fruition. Distance and time and a whole bunch of other things came into play. And the OJs had a song years ago. We were talking about, I forget the name of the song, but one of the phrases is, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Too much absence makes the heart wander. Well, yeah, hers wandered. So at a very critical time. So of course that didn't work out. But wish them well. Yeah.
And your marriage ended because of the military experience that you had to
Yeah, that was a component of the demise of my marriage. But the main crux of it, I discovered later. My ex-wife had reproductive complications from a child, which I knew. And I knew about the first 2 miscarriages. I did not recognize the signs for the third. So between that and the difficulties we were having with time, I was teaching at the base. I probably spent more time at the base than I did at home. And I was also working at the post office at that time, moonlighting there because I wanted to maximize funds so we could purchase a house and so on and so forth. But we were like ships passing in the night. And these other things were weights on us. I mean, good person. We still talk today, check up on each other, but there's no trying to get back. She's still in New York. I'm here in Virginia.
Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult to maintain relationships just because life happens and there's so many things that you're trying to deal with and trying to process. And sometimes there's a drifting apart. So totally understand. So you talked about your support systems. You talk about your family members being your support system, your niece and your aunt and uncle. And so what techniques did you use to be able to overcome all the things that you're going through, the loss of your father, the loss of the job before you even knew that you were going to be awarded your retirement? What did you do?
During that time, I had a lot of mental anguish and mental blocks, but I was somehow able to, my aunt was very encouraging, as I said before. I listened to her because that's the voice I heard from a kid. So it was easy for her to encourage me, who knew me from a child and also absolutely knew my character. Having lost my father, I started to replay his advice, his techniques and examples and teachings back to myself, along with conversations we had at his bedside in the hospital before he eventually passed. My father was a strong man, by hook or crook, a fantastic provider. And he made sure I got the best education and God-centered values at home and in school. He was proud of my celebrated career in the Air Force, my accomplishments, my promotions, my rise to higher echelons in the Air Force. For me, my additional mission was to keep him happy and proud and continue to make him smile. I didn't get the chance to do that based on him passing way before any of us. ALS is what took him out. It took him out quick. So we didn't even have a good time to process through. He was discovered in December of the year before, and by March he was gone. So that was real tough. But he loved and cherished us. He was sought after by all his children, his grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and my friends just wanted to stay at my house when I was younger because, and their parents let them. And I asked one of my friends' mothers, why you let them stay at your house? Or why do you let them come over to my house all the time? And she said, because your father's there.
No.
And their father was not. So my dad wasn't only a dad for me, he was a dad for his nieces, nephews, and his kids' friends, which is a rare breed of man.
Yeah. So where was mom during this time growing up?
Mom and he had divorced when I was 13. So she was living in the Bronx, doing her own thing, my biological mom. And that was a tough relationship growing up. I was the first one out the chute and the oldest one. So I looked too much like my father. I was too much like my father. And the older I got, the more I looked like him and the more I act like him. Yeah. So she continued to have problems in relationship. And I didn't find out till years later that my mother, the reason she acted that way is because when she was younger, she had been abused, but she hid it through those methods and was never upfront with us about what happened to her. Mm-hmm. And some of it, I don't think she fully understood because talk about refusing help. She was the queen until her health came into question. And then my oldest sister and I, who she treated the worst, were the ones who had to take care of her. And I have to say that God changed my mother's life. And we became the best of friends. And it was a labor of love to take care of her.
Oh, that's very special. Abuse will do that. When you've been abused, there is so much stigma attached to it. And so there's a lot of shame oftentimes, and those who are victims will hide it and not talk about whatever they've been through because it's just too painful.
She was very prideful, so she wanted to appear as if nothing was wrong, that everything was right. And my mother was a very pretty woman, so she got accolades from men, and people just, because of her beauty, they pumped her up. And that was her defense mode. She used that in the wrong way to survive.
Well, I'm glad that you were there in the end for your mom and that you were able to forge a good relationship.
Oh, yeah. You want to put a good cap on a bad start? I couldn't think that up. I couldn't make that up. But all I could say is I have the utmost gratitude to God for bringing us back together. We used to leave before she passed. When I would leave to go back to either North Carolina, because she was in the Bronx in a nursing home, North Carolina or here in Virginia, after we prayed, I'd say, hey, Ma, who loves you? Mm-hmm. And she would point her finger to me and go, you do. Aww. And I says, and who's my girl? And she would point to herself and say, I. So that was always a fun moment for me.
Yeah, it's very special.
Yes, it is.
So, Doc, how did you process, especially with the military and what they did to you and having to fight, how did you navigate the process of forgiveness to be able to not get stuck?
That was tough. Because when wrong is done to you and it's continual and it's done to you in such a way that even you don't think you can make it, forgiveness is not something that you think about. Retaliation is, but at that time, forgiveness is not what you're thinking about. Mm-hmm. However, because of my Aunt Helen, her encouragement and leading me back to the things I was taught from a child, I started looking back on my life and where I had failed, where I hurt others deliberately or unintentionally and had to ask for forgiveness. And for most have been forgiven. Some, no, some I couldn't find. But I recognized that I needed forgiveness from God and them for my wrongdoings over time. So how was I not to forgive? I began to realize that none of us are perfect, especially myself, no matter what I've accomplished in life. And I asked God to reshape and refocus me his way, not my way. Because if it was left up to me, I'd probably be in jail.
Hmm. I like that process because oftentimes we wait for forgiveness from others when they've wronged us. But I like your process of looking at yourself and saying, you know what? I've done things to others that I need them to forgive me or God to forgive me. And since I'm not perfect and no one's perfect, I can actually go through this process. And it's not easy, you said. It takes time to be able to forgive what they did to you as well.
Yeah. And I'm grateful for that because I sleep good at night.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing too is that the utmost thing, I save it for last, is I got closer to God. I tell people, stay close to God, never leave his side. And I have the experience of leaving his side, and I have the experience of running back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never leave his side again. But my thing to them is stay close to God, never leave his side, and let him lead, not you. And the not you was me pointing my finger at myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. So, Doc, what lessons have you learned in this journey that you've been through?
Lessons I've learned is to rely on God and family and those who are sent to help you in your time of need, and stop trying to do it all yourself. Yeah, I was a lone star, and I was arrogant about it because I was a lone star. That my father had a saying, use your head. I send you to good school, so use your head for more than a hat rack. And I was able to do that, but it put me in a position of, I could do it. I don't need anybody. That's way wrong. The other lessons are to not be ashamed, to ask for help when needed, that there's no shame in falling down, hitting rock bottom, unless you fail to get back up. Mm-hmm. That's sometimes easier said than done, but you got to keep moving. I kept repeating a poem from my dad's sister, my other Olga. She gave me a poem as a teenager that says, don't quit. Even though I did, I went back to that poem and started to grab strength from that, that you're never too good for bad things to happen. Bad times, bad people, bad things, just plain adversity to make itself known in your life. The Bible says the rain falls on the just and the unjust. No one can escape adversity. It's how you accept it, deal with it, and I'll go back to stay close to God and never leave his side and let him lead, not you. Those are my lessons.
Lessons learned.
Yeah.
The hard ones, but they're good ones. And I always say life is not this linear line. We're going to go through good times. We're going to go through not so good times. And we're going to quit at times, but it's about getting up. Even after things are rough, even after you quit, you say, okay, I'm not going to stay in this place. I'm going to get back up and I'm going to keep trying, because when we go through adversities, that's how we grow the most.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah.
And having taken this adversity class that I spoke about earlier in my church, I grew up in a Christian family, so you think you know. And then you come to a class where what you know is expanded in your mind and your life, and your mind is blown, and you're like, oh man, I've been doing it wrong. And that class was such a help and a benefit to me that when they asked me to be a facilitator, I told them, I says, oh, why me? I'm no big whoop. And they went, for what you went through? So, and health-wise also. So I could not see, I prayed about it, but I couldn't see myself not giving back when they were increasing in numbers, and they thought enough of what I had gone through in my life to ask me. So I signed up with them as a facilitator, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, I think you're the perfect person to help others who are going through adversity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So what would you tell others who have experienced injustice and they don't know how to navigate it?
That's good. First, I would tell them to think it through again. Think the adversity through again. That's not in the class. That's from me because I had to do that. Think it through again and try to see where you have made mistakes or missed something so that you don't repeat that. Once you've vetted yourself, gather all the proof you can to show where you were not wrong and get a good lawyer who will work with you and be prepared to do your part for whatever they need from you in order to help you. And again, stay close to God, never leave his side, never get out front. Let him lead, not you.
Great words of wisdom.
Thank you.
And one of the things that you talked about earlier is the need to rely on others for support. And I'm glad that you're doing this group because one of the things that you are allowing to happen is for people to come and to realize that they're not alone and that they can rely on the support of other people, just like you had to do that as well.
Yeah, that was a mind blower for me because when you live in a mental silo with blinders on, you think it's just you.
Yeah.
No way. So I'm grateful to my family, my stepmother, my sister coming here later today to visit me from New York. And I just love that lady for stepping in when my mother wasn't there. Her and my father married, the longest marriage that he had and the most loving marriage. And she's got her own family, but she holds us tight. Oh. And she's coming here. She's the one who leads us in the right direction. She's a God-fearing woman. And she did not have to forgive me, but she did and gave me a second chance. So for the rest of my life and her life, whatever she needs, she got me.
You're going to be there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
So we always go through triggers in our lives. When we go through different things, even if when we become overcomers, it's going to always be triggers. And so what are some of the things that you do or say to yourself to keep on going when you just need words of affirmation to keep you strengthened?
That's a constant for me. I tell myself, this is not the end. This came to pass, not to stay. No matter what the position of other persons or people are, I have a right and a purpose to be here, to live and do good. I'm adamant about that. My family invested a lot in me and it's proved right. So I'm going to keep doing it. I tell the young folks and I tell myself first when I need to have an affirmation because of something that went wrong, I tell myself, check yourself before you wreck yourself. In other words, check yourself first. I recite to myself my father's favorite verses written on his tombstone. Psalms 23:4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort and protect me. And I quote Psalm 91:11. For God has given his angels charge over me to keep me in all my ways. And the last one, I'll repeat to myself, as I've said several times, stay close to God as best I can. I never leave his side. I ask him not to let me get out front. And I let him lead, not me. So last affirmation is let go and let God. I know it sounds corny. I know we've heard it before, but yeah.
Yeah, I love those scriptures. And it does not sound corny at all. And that is a really good reminder that when you live your life according to God's purpose, even when someone or people try to come against you, continue to have that faith because God will open the door
Yeah.
lead you through it, just like he did with you. And you're able to win that case because you did what was right. And he does bless those who are righteous. So thank you so much for sharing your story and for being open and authentic. And I know that others who are struggling with just various injustices will be able to have hope that their day of victory will come.
Yes, I hope so, and I pray so for others, as was done for me.
Thank you, Doc.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Beverly.
Thank you, Doc, for sharing your story and for being so open to talk about this challenging period in your life. Even though this wrongful termination affected you deeply, your faith was reignited and you fought your way back. And you're now helping other people find hope and resiliency through your volunteer work. You found new passions due to your pain, and you are now fulfilling a new calling in your life as you serve in a different capacity. Thank you for giving 38 years to our country. Thank you for your service. I will leave you with 2 affirmations from my Love Talk card deck. The first is, I deserve to be treated with love and respect. And the second is, I know that an open door is on the horizon when a door closes. If you are in need of counseling services, please visit lifeenrichmentcounseling.com to purchase the Love Talk Affirmation Card Deck and to listen to other podcast episodes. Please visit yourlovetalk.com. If you have enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with your family and friends. Thank you for tuning into this episode today. This is Dr. Beverly from Your Love Talk. Blessings.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Your Love Talk. Remember, you're never alone in your struggles. Take the time to affirm yourself daily as an act of love to yourself. And know that this podcast is here to offer genuine support and guidance whenever you need it. For more insightful and transformative discussions, visit yourlovetalk.com to explore additional episodes. Take the next step forward with courage, knowing you can overcome any challenge. That's all for today. Until next time.